Welcome everyone to an episode of the Ol'Timers comic book show. Another year older. I'm your host, Johnny Machine Hughes, and joining me this time around to commiserate, well, kind of probably to celebrate. You know what he's like, he's a Pats fan, so he's going to be like, yeah, you got knocked out. It is the Professor.
Hey,
Hey,
Johnny!
you got knocked out.
Hey, the Dolphins are gone again. Hey, the Patriots went out last week. Hey,
Yay. The pit last week? I think
hey.
the Patriots were out last
Well,
month.
Patriots have been out of it since the start of the season.
Oh my God.
So,
I saw something really funny last night as I was watching the UK coverage of the Dolphins. The Dolphins game is that somebody compared what's your guy called? Matt, what's his name? I forget.
Mac Jones.
Mac Jones to, are you ready? Trevor Lawrence.
What?
Because they both have about the same record, they both have about the same stats, and that sort of thing. And everyone thinks everyone loves Lawrence, but you could be the argument that he's turning into a bit of a bust, maybe.
Well, that's kind of a tale of two cities, right? Because Mac Jones came out and was like arguably one of the rookie quarterbacks of the year 3 years ago, right? And
Right.
Trevor Lawrence started at the bottom of the pack, going like 1-16 or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but you've seen since then like this, right? Mac Jones goes like this. Trevor Lawrence is his stock is up, I think. So,
Well,
they were fair to Midland this year, but I think first half of the year he was playing the kind of football he wanted to play. So
I think the knock on Lawrence is he doesn't throw a lot of touchdown passes, to be fair. And the last game I saw when he was winning in against the Titans, he just missed so many passes. And the fourth down pass at the end of the game was just nowhere near the receiver. It's like, come on, at least help a guy out, right? Help his brother out.
Hey, at least Trevor Lawrence finished the season.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. There is that. All right, then. So this week we're having a conversation that's a little bit more me than a little bit you, although this is your idea, right?
Hey, when we've been on this long, it's kind of tough sometimes to think of ideas to talk about. And I actually like this idea when I was thinking of it. I'm like, you know what? This is going to require me to educate myself a little bit. And and I have an expert from across the pond to kind of maybe
coming on this expert.
Yeah, you.
Yeah.
Machine.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I mean you're there at ground zero at the UK comics. That's how you got your start, right?
So. Exactly. So we're talking about UK comics and UK comic creators. Now, when we think about UK, it's easy to fall into the trap of the guys that make or have made DC as well as Marvel. Just yesterday when we recorded No Prize, we were talking about Kieran Gillen on the Rise of X.
Yes.
Yeah, so we Brits have made an impact. But way back when, back in the Ol'Timers, this was your kind of bread and butter for British comic books. This is the 50s version of the Eagle, which featured Dan Dare, pilot of the future, which is kind of like a traditional Royal Air Force pilot with his pal Digby in the take on the Mekon and the Trees. And it's kind of like old boys network type thing. It was revamped in the 80s, but this is the original. We all know this one, 2000 AD.
Yep.
Ironically, Judge Dredd does not feature in the first issue.
When does Judge Dredd come in? Does he come in issue 2?
Issue.
Okay.
Issue 2.
And he's pretty much a staple throughout, right?
That's right. If you imagine, do you remember those when Action Comics was a weekly book?
Yeah.
You'd have the Superman bit in the middle. And Superman would be consistent, or the whole cast would revolve. It's very similar. Judge Dredd would be the main guy, the main focus every week. There's an editor in charge called Tharg. And this is kind of like an ongoing thing when we look at British comics, and we'll see some later on, where there's some sort of like editor in the background who's also a character in itself. I don't know why we did that at all. It's strange. For a lot of people, the Commando book. This is a pocket-sized book. It's about a year big. Still in publication today. And it's stories of various aspects of wars, so like World War One, World War Two.
And I've seen a couple of these books now that weren't they just they were shrunken down reprints of regular comics, but the hard thing was that they made it very difficult to read, right? Because the print was so small. It's not like they made the print any bigger to cover the page. So we've seen some of those that, you know, they look fun and they look like, you know, they're pretty cheap, right?
Yeah,
they were pretty cheap newsstand stuff.
Newsstand stuff, and what you got to remember is, especially with Commando versus the other two, is very much of its time. So there's going to be language in there that you'll think is a little bit inflammatory nowadays that you wouldn't get away with saying, or you wouldn't want it there. You know,
right.
But you know, it's the height of you know, keeping the forces entertained, and you know,
and it's propaganda too, right? Pretty much.
This was probably one of the least offensive covers I found. But, you know, Nazi death camp and all sorts of crazy stuff going on in that one. And then this last one, this fourth one, I put this in there because this is an oddity. This is kind of like a mainstay for. It's called Looking magazine, and the way it works is it's tied to pop culture. So what would happen is they'd have a feature. This one's the Logan's Run TV show, very short-lived. Along with articles and posters and all that sort of stuff of movies and TV shows, they'd have comic strips in. So if you have a look on the cover, there's like an ABBA comic book strip.
That's interesting.
You're like, what? Why? What? Who's ABBA taking on board? You know, they're fighting. You know, Meatloaf.
No, that's awesome, and that's actually more of a magazine, right? Like kind of like a full color type. Yeah, okay, I get it.
And like each issue, there'd maybe be about four or five comic strips, and they last for like 4 or 5 weeks. You only get 2 pages, 3 pages max of this comic strip, you know. And as it moved into the 80s, you get a Knight Rider one, Airwolf, you get Tron in there, you get anything that was big on TV. The strip would appear in Looking.
And so now this kind of like segues into the design overall of some of these British comics that I've been looking at. Is now, first of all, a lot of them were published weekly, right? So you could come every week for Star Wars, right? Star Wars Weekly. But the thing was it would be maybe half of the Star Wars book, and then a bunch of different reprints inside that book, along with maybe some, I don't know if you'd probably like just throw Battlestar Galactica or something in there, like some sci-fi books.
Exactly right.
But you never get the full issue, so that would keep you coming back the next week. So sometimes it would be three weeks before you finished the Star Wars issue that they reprinted, right?
Exactly right, and that goes across the whole board. So 2000 AD started this whole serialization type thing. And every UK printed comic that came out then followed trends. So you have things like Spider-Man Weekly, Spider-Man and Hulk. There was a Captain Britain book. There was all these superhero Rampage, all these types of books, anthology style. But the anthology wasn't actually, the book wasn't written that way. It was, as you've absolutely said, Professor, a cut up of, hey, there's an American comic book. You've got 21 pages. Let's knock it down. Put it down to like 5 pages per week or whatever it is, and then boom, there you go. There's a month's worth of comics. Always black and white, it seemed.
Now that was another question that I had for you. Is like, why now they would get the reprint? I imagine the reprint was in color, right? And then they would just wash out the color. I don't know how they did it.
I don't know, but I remember in the 70s, I remember buying the Amazing Spider-Man Summer Special. It was Amazing Spider-Man Annual #1. So when you think about when that came out in America, what's that? Would it come out like 66, 64?
Which Spider-Man? Like
Amazing,
depends.
Amazing Spider-Man Annual #1.
Like 64 probably.
64, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And I didn't get till 77.
Okay.
So you could argue, and this is what makes British Marvel so kind of funky, because at the same time as you're getting that, you're also then getting some of Claremont's X-Men a couple of years later
Yeah.
with the Dark Phoenix saga, and you're like, wait, what? How can this be relevant Spider-Man when you've got Steve Ditko art and then you've got John Burton doing X-Men? It was just such a convoluted, complicated time for if you're a Marvel fan, which is why I suppose so many of my friends got into DC, because you could go to the news agents, the mom and pop stars shops, they're either where the 7-Elevens and whatnot, and you'd be able to just go and buy a DC comic book. So,
Well, that's in color.
yeah,
So just actually import.
An imported book, yeah.
So I was looking at the history of comic book publishing in the UK, and I did not know that post World War II there was an embargo on comics being imported from America to England because they wanted to promote the printing, the British printing presses. So they did not allow comics to be actually come over from America into Britain until 1959. From post World War II to 1959, you couldn't get an American comic book.
Cool. That's not cool. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
It's like, so,
yeah. And then it was when Marvel decided to, start doing stuff in the UK, and everything was reprinted. The mishmash of stuff that you see, and that, like what you had said earlier, like I don't know why they did some of this stuff. The editors of Marvel UK had like total control over what they published and what they didn't, and so the reasons that you were getting some of Claremont's X-Men, but also Ditko's Spider-Man, was because the editor liked that Spider-Man better than what was being published at the time. So he just published Lee and Ditko's Spidey. So I thought it was fairly interesting to see the different eras and what Marvel UK looked like in the 70s versus the 80s versus their last gasp, so to speak, in the 90s when they tried to do different things. And of course, Marvel imploding pretty much in the early 90s was what killed Marvel UK.
Definitely. And it's that period we're going to start with. We're going to start with the tumultuous 90s.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's your choice up first. And it's Death's Head 2, #1.
Yes.
Check it out.
Not the first Death's Head, the second.
No. We've already looked at Death's Head, the first one, I believe, at one point. Go on, sorry.
No, I was just going to say the reason I picked this book was because this is the first Marvel UK book that I got, because this is now, so Marvel UK actually did some kind of like offensive into the US market. And started publishing books over here. So I actually had the opportunity to buy Death's Head 2 #1 at my local comic book shop, which previously I could not get Marvel UK books. So I gave this one a shot because it looked cool. Death's Head 2 really, he looked a whole lot better than the first one. You can see the first head sitting there. Now, like when looking back on it, rereading it, the creators on this book are just some of the old staples now of Marvel, Marvel sci-fi, and we were going to talk about a whole bunch of UK creators that have come out. I called it the British Invasion from comics, but this is Abnett and Lanning and Liam Sharp.
Yep, so this is written by Dan Abnett, Liam Sharp's on art, Andy Lanning's on inks, with Bambo's Giorgio, colours by Helen Stone, and I've got Perry, is it Godbold? Can't be right, as letterer. You're right, Death's Head 2 featured in a magazine called Overkill in the UK.
Yep.
Which is, again, another anthology with 4 different stories
It was
bundled together. We didn't even get the whole comic book. If you wanted if you wanted this comic book, you had to go to a comic book shop to get it. The new
isn't
versions would sell overkill. You're like, what?
isn't that weird though that you had Marvel UK publishing UK books in America where you had to get the anthology book to get all the stories but Marvel UK had a like a 6 or 7 or 8 books a month that they were publishing over here.
Yeah.
So
I remember Knights of the Pendragon,
yep,
Clandestine,
yep.
which was
Uh,
Alan Davis's take on trying to do something cool and clever.
there was Motor Mouth,
Oh, yeah.
and there was Warheads, and
Hmm.
there was then they started doing just like 4 issue limited series. There was Dark Angel, but then there was Mystech Wars and Dark Guard that was kind of like their attempt at making like an Avengers type team. They teamed up all the UK heroes, which it was a mess. If you
Yeah.
read it, it was a mess. But um,
And I think that's probably, you know what, this is probably my first foray on what you would call independent comics,
mhm.
because the it, you can argue that independent comics and comic books, but they don't have the recognized characters, don't have, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, the Avengers, and that sort of thing.
Oh,
So
yeah.
when you look at the British comics, from their creation of things like Overkill, um, it's kind of like looking at independent comics now, and the whole format of Overkill was structured so that it challenged or wanted to appeal to the 2000 AD crowd.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it did, like, but still. So what do you think of this book? Rereading it now?
Um, so it's by the numbers rereading it, you
Yeah.
rereading issue 1, you get introduced to the original Death's Head, and by page 5 you have the new Death's Head, who's actually called Minion in this first book. But
Mm,
Minion is a creation of AIM, which is what's interesting about this is, so now this is Marvel UK using regular Marvel Universe tropes. So
mm,
you know that this Death Set immediately exists in the Marvel Universe proper because of
mm,
AIM. And then you see, I actually thought that Minion was pretty cool. Like he kind of like a bounty hunter, like Death's
mm,
Head, but every time he went after his bounty, he actually killed them and assimilated them, kind of like the Borg
mm,
in Star Trek. And then, um, and then it turns out that the original Death said is his next bounty, and so by the time this issue's over, he's apparently killed the original Death's Head. Now
mm.
the 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 interesting thing about this book, and nothing says early 90s like this other side character here, right?
Yeah, the redhead.
Yes, yes, the
Yeah, it's just like
pink head.
I
Yeah,
looked at this book here, and I'm like, this page, I'm like, why are you trying to be Jim? Why are you trying to be um Jack Kirby, as well as Jim Lee, all in the same guy? Yeah.
yeah.
Pick a style and stay with it, man.
Hey, well, well, Liam Sharp actually became a really great artist, but this is
Oh,
one of his early works. It must have been. So,
it is his early work, but you can see the image influences on his work for sure.
right. So what's cool about it, I guess, is subjective, but when
Mhm,
Minion absorbs or assimilates his bounties, he takes more and more of the personalities of the people he destroys into
mhm,
himself. And so what you see eventually is he assimilates Death's Head and basically becomes Death's Head.
mhm.
So Death's Head overrides his programming pretty much, and then going forward, that's why this is called Death's Head 2,
Yeah.
but and why he looks so much different from the first one. Um, and I thought this was interesting. They like all the Marvel UK titles, they don't really know what to do with these characters. They
True that.
don't really interact very well together. They don't have anything with, like, they exist in certain spots. The Marvel US didn't really help them out at all. By you would think that they would use the characters in their books, which they did. I mean, we've seen Death's Head in Death's Head 2
Hmm.
in like Fantastic Four, maybe a couple of issues throwaway. There was an issue of the Incredible Hulk in 1993 that had Motormouth and Kill Power in it,
Yeah.
and it was just kind of a, we'll throw them a bone, but they never really had any like I think Iron Man shows up or Spider-Man shows up in a couple of them, but nothing
Well,
huge.
yeah, I think well, actually, what in volume 2, this is a 4-issue mini. In volume 2,
Yeah,
the issues then start to have guest stars. So the X-Men are in number 1,
yeah,
Spider-Man is somewhere to try and generate that kind of that buy-in for the English crowd.
yeah,
Um, it goes, I suppose, somewhere to show just how popular the mainstream characters are. If you're going to have to incorporate it into something that, as a company, putting so much time and effort into it, I thought the production of this book. You're right, reading it is by the numbers, and I like Dan Abnett. I think some of his most recent stuff
yeah,
has been spot on. But it is by the numbers. At this instance, the art is just gorgeous. When
yes,
and I'm not. I can say this because he's not here. Because 13th is a huge Liam Sharp fan. But I can say this whilst he's not here is that I'm not a huge Liam Sharp fan. He's good, he's great, but it's like, I've just
uh,
recently seen his Exo Man of War stuff, and it's not too dissimilar from a couple of these earlier pages where he's all stood and he's got his blades sticking out of his arms and stuff. And it's just not my cup of tea all the way through. But you know, you are right. There are traces of that '90s vibe. You know,
the
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 girl
color,
characters.
yeah, the colors are a little all over the place too, but
Yeah, yeah, but it's kind of. We're not seeing it in its original format, so we've got to think about the color. It is giving it the colors are giving it a different look and feel to
yeah,
your standard superhero book. So I think that's kind of cool. Um, just it's such an interesting premise, and it's just when you have a successful character like Death's Head in the first instance,
yeah,
it's quite a jump to think. Oh, I'll tell you what, we're going to do another branch of our own comic book company. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll kill probably the only recognizable character we've got from that and
yeah.
change him up. You know, and it's what?
I remember in the early '90s really kind of thinking that this was a unique looking book on the stands, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And it actually, this book actually made me start buying most of the rest of the Marvel UKs as they came out, though none of the rest of the line looked or felt anything like this book. Um, but it was interesting to see Marvel trying to do something a little bit different. But
I think
we know why. I mean, Marvel UK went out of business a couple of
yeah.
years later. So
I remember at the time I had a little comic book business on the side, and
mm,
every time I put my order in, I seemed to get a couple of issues of Knights of Pendragon thrown in for good measure. And it
mhm.
was like, I could never shift them. Nobody was buying that book. It was like, hey, a new book. Oh, that's been
It
good.
was, and I can't remember who wrote that book, but I remember the artist was Gary Erskine,
This guy, yeah.
and he was an acquired taste too. So as I don't know if did he ever do anything else. I think seem to recall him maybe being on like a weird, maybe like a horror book or something.
Yeah,
I
maybe,
can't,
maybe.
but there were a couple of artists that got their start in Marvel UK that became huge stars over here in
Yep.
America. There was Gary Frank
Uh-huh.
and
Hulk.
Carlos Pacheco,
Yeah.
and then of course, well, Alan Davis was working on Captain Britain uh, before that, and so was Alan Moore, right? Alan Moore did
Alan
some, yeah,
Miller, yeah. Alan Miller and yeah, the Allens. And of course, when we talk about British, you can't think, we think Alan Moore, you've got to think Dave Gibbons from The Watchmen.
absolutely, yep,
And then you've got to think of Alan Grant on Batman, who was on
yep,
2000 AZ.
hmm
Garth Ennis. Kieran Gillen.
Yep. You gotta mention Garth Ennis because he basically carved a niche for himself, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you know, these are writers who are still producing work now. Maybe not as prolific as they used to be, but you know, the stuff that they produce still holds up now.
Yeah.
You know, I love Alan. I know he's passed away, but I love Alan Grant's Batman. I think it's the cleverest, funniest Batman. And when you think back then, you know, Alan Grant, then he helped solidify Detective Comics before it was due to get cancelled back in the 80s, before Batman the movie came out. Detective Comics was on the cancel list, and they ended up giving it to him, John Wagner, who was on 2000 AD, and then Norm Brayfogle, and said, "I see what I can do." John Wagner quit the book before writing the full script, so it was Grant and Brayfogle, and look how good that book was back in the day. So.
Yeah,
Crazy.
and you can come up with, I mean, the creators, the Marvel UK or regular UK writers that have gone on to rule the world of Hollywood with Ennis and Mark Millar.
Yeah,
you know, he was
Grant Morrison.
Grant Morrison. Come on,
yeah, it's like
so
a quiet taste, Grant Morrison, but still,
yeah, and
yeah.
it's crazy the amount of talent. So. And
crazy.
right around that time too, like the 80s and the late 80s, early 90s.
It's crazy the amount of talent that have had success in Marvel and DC and now independent work.
Yeah.
But couldn't get Marvel UK to work.
It's, well, I mean, I'm sure it has nothing to do with the talent. I'm sure
it doesn't, but
yeah.
You know,
but it's, and we talked about this earlier about how Marvel UK probably really bad at getting their own books into the hands of the readers in England or in the United Kingdom, you know.
They were stuck with their format. We are going to show the anthology and Hell or High Water. And when you think back in the 90s, there was many comic book shops now selling direct market comics. So, you know, people didn't want an anthology book of only 4 pages anymore. I want my 22 pages.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the next book. When you look at the Star Wars anthology book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could you at the same time walk into a direct market place and get a color Star Wars book?
I couldn't. We had no direct market. So
this was, I mean, if you wanted Star Wars, this was the only place to get it.
The only place to get it.
Okay.
Before we get to Star Wars, though, let's have an advert for one of our other shows. You know what? It's a new year, Professor. I think we should start a petition for some new ads. What do you think?
I think that you're right. 100%.
Yeah, let's get some new ads. I'll have a word with the powers that be and see what we can do. But in the meantime, if you want to see more of this guy, check the show. That's right. No Prize podcast for everything that is Marvel, MCU, and Disney Plus. You never know. We might even talk about Echo.
We talk about it twice.
Yeah. Echo. Yeah. All right. Teasers abound. It is time to feel the force. Check it out. This is Star Wars Weekly. Now, I know what people are going to say. We talk about UK creators and UK comic books, but this is an example of the comics that you would get in the 70s from Marvel. All right. So this is Star Wars Weekly. It's number 30. I picked this one because I love the issue. I used to own this issue in its entirety. When I was a kid, I went to a jumble sale, which is kind of like a garage sale, I guess you'd say. But instead of being at like somebody's garage, it's like in a hall, like a jumble sale.
It's like a flea market.
Yeah, like a flea market. And there was a guy selling Star Wars comics at a penny. And my dad picked. He said, "Oh, you can have 30. Got 30 pence on us. You can have 30." So of course I picked 1 through 30. So there you
Oh,
go.
he had them all, huh?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
he had a whole chunk of them. I should have got them all, but no, I was like 1 to 30. This is what I got. So for those of you that already know this, Star Wars at the time was being written by Archie Goodwin. This issue features, or the book from which this is cut from, features art from Carmen Infantino and Terry Austin on is in there, as well as inks. Letters of John Constanza. There are no colours. There is no colorist.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
being a snob.
noticed that. I was like, is there a credit for a colorist and then there's no colorist?
Nope.
But no, there's a credit for a toner.
Yeah, it was a Hewlett and Packard.
That's what I was reading it, and I'm like, a toner? Is that the black and white? Is he responsible for the grays?
Yeah, it must be. All right, so this is Star Wars. This is the kind of escape the water planet, not Camino. Don't get yourselves all excited. Although, funny enough, Dragon Riders are in this book, or the book beforehand, I should say. And there's a culmination, the bump into Crimson Jack, a space pirate who's had it in for Han Solo, stole his treasure that he was supposed to give to Jabba the Hutt in an early issue. Damn you, Crimson Jack. And as things would have it, they need to come to some sort of crazy deal. The thing that I remember the most about this book is thinking when I read it how awful Carmen Infantino's art was.
I was going to say something about that. He was really kind of mailing it in at this point, wasn't he?
It's just, yeah, it's super stylized. There's just enough going on so you can tell who's who, apart from Chewbacca, who's just God knows whatever. It's so, I don't know. It's just so bad somehow, but yet so good at the same time. There's no like sense of dimension. So this is supposed to be the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, and instead of being its long cylindrical self, as you see in the movie, it's like flat. It's like boof.
Yeah.
Like the bridge of the Enterprise. It's like
Yeah.
whoa. I don't know. It has a charm of its own, I suppose.
Well, you got to remember the time when this was published was between Star Wars and Empire, and they were clamoring just for any kind of product at all, right?
That's a good shout. And sorry, I forgot to give prices on this. I'll go back. Death's Head, Go Collect cost you $60. Over here in the UK, it costs you about a tenner. This book, I couldn't find the price on Go Collect. It is from August '78. You can get it on eBay for £3 to £5. So it's not an expensive book in any shape, way, or form. But yeah, you're absolutely right. This was the only place you could get Star Wars material between the movies.
Yeah.
This in the books. And this young lady's jolly. She's got a thing for Han Solo. That's nice. The art's a little bit too dynamic, I think, for Star Wars.
It actually looks more of like an animated style.
Yeah.
Like I was like looking at this going, if this was a cartoon back in 1977, this is probably what the characters would look like.
Definitely. The next up is the Hunter, who recently has been in the Marvel book again. This is kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about. The letters page. I love the letters page. Let's see if I can.
I looked to see if there was a little Johnny the Machine Hughes in there, and that's why you picked this issue. But
I love this. Dear Star Wars Weekly, I get your comic every week, but when you finish the real story, I was very upset that Han and Chewie split from Luke and Princess Leia and the droids. I would be very happy if you teamed them all up in a great battle against the Empire. The stories at the back are rubbish. I think it would be better if you changed them to superhero stories like Spider-Man, no hyphen, and Hulk, or another one of your heroes. And I think Luke should lose his lightsabers more. Stephen Pickford from Stockport, hang your head in shame. I think you've got to really appreciate the fact that at this stage, Marvel are trying to continue the sci-fi theme.
Yeah. That's not of a bad sketch of Chewbacca, though. That's not bad.
It's really good.
Chewbacca's notoriously difficult to draw.
True that. True that. Oop, I've got a bit big again.
To make them look right. If my argument for that is look at the first like 10 issues of Star Wars that was published over here.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get this back to where it should be. And that'll do. That'll do. All right. Okay. One of the other reasons why I wanted to bring this book up is because there are backup stories.
Yeah.
This is the anthology. So, whoops, too big. Come on, you can do it. Is that better? Yeah. So this is Star-Lord, and this is written by Chris Claremont, drawn by Carmen Infantino again. This time with Bob Wycheck. I assume Bob's on the inks on this one. The art looks so much better. And the ship looks super hot. Now, if she was in Guardians of the Galaxy, I'd pay more attention. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. How explain this to me then? Because this is Peter Quill's Star-Lord.
Yeah.
But it's not the Peter Quill that people will know from the movies.
Oh, no, because this was with these Marvel Spotlight reprints. So I mean, this is basically a launching point for some of these newer characters that they were just kind of playing with in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And Star-Lord never really actually came out in a full color book initially. It was just black and white backups from some of their magazines and just a couple of appearances in Marvel Spotlight. You didn't really do much. You didn't really kind of understand him. He was kind of different from appearance to appearance. Didn't really look the same. Here he's kind of got the costume, but not the headgear that he had later. Cowboy hat for some reason. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, and again, kind of a by the number story, right? So
Chris Claremont, isn't it? So A, you've got loads of words going on, and B, that the ship starts falling for Peter, and then has the angst moment of, oh my God, what am I doing? I need to run away, and all that sort of stuff. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. I love this. It was cheesy on top of cheese. It was great. It was like a 4-cheese pizza. It was, and the art looks so much better.
But this is the perfect character that you would pair with Star Wars, right? It would be Star Wars, Star-Lord.
Yeah.
This is George Lucas's universe, but hey, here's some Marvel. We're doing sci-fi too. Check us out. And then
it's interesting because this shows the disparity, So you've got the first half of the book, you've got Star Wars, which is a reprint, funnily enough, of a pretty recent Marvel book.
Right.
78, Star Wars was around. But then you've then got the Marvel Spotlight book. Now, at no point would we as a reading nation, at least not in the Northeast where I was, get an option to see that Marvel Spotlight. So Star Wars Weekly was a great way to find out some other books, to look at things. And when you consider how, I don't want to say childish, okay, I'll say how young the Star Wars art looks.
Yeah.
And then you read this Star-Lord book, which it's the same artist, but it looks so much more mature. You think to yourself, how can you get away with that? And the disparity.
I can 100% guarantee you that the Star Wars book looks not as good because I'm positive it was a rush job.
Oh,
it was. We need as much Star Wars stuff. Just do it. Get it done.
Yeah. The Millennium Falcon changes its shapes more times than it's terrible.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about was Tales of the Watcher. Where was this originally from? So I'll give you the stats. This is written by Stan Lee, Howard Purcell, even is on pencils. Dan Adkins is your inker, and Gene Izzo is your letterer. Where did these come from? Because I used to love these as well, the kind of offbeat ideas of one-shot type things.
So Tales of the Watcher was actually, wow, I can't really remember. It's a backup feature that was in, I think it was the Hulk book. There was, if it was Tales to Astonish, or it wasn't Tales of Suspense. I want to say it was Tales to Astonish when they had the Hulk in the first half of the book, and then it was Namor for a while, and then they spun Namor out, But Tales of the Watcher was one of those random backup stories that they did. And quickly, these quick little 6-page, 8-page stories,
Mm.
several times. And a lot of the times, these Tales of the Watcher were actually reprints from earlier issues from the pre-Marvel, like Tales of Suspense um, and Strange Tales
I,
from the
I,
50s.
okay, so Tales of the Watcher is a backup feature that ran in Tales of Suspense,
Okay.
4958, from Jan 64 to October 65. Also appeared in Silver Surfer 1 to 7 from 68 and 69.
But
And the Marvel
but the Silver Surfer ones were reprints from the Tales of Suspense ones.
So there you go. See, there. So it's just a
So
continuation of the reprint of the reprint of the reprint.
and the Marvel did that all the time. Marvel if they couldn't reuse something for slap something into a reprint. How many annuals do you ever get that had the backup stories with reprints of other comics, right?
True that.
So
But I love these again. I thought these were class. It's kind of a little bit Twilight Zoney.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
those are the issues. I mean, if you read this, there's no Marvel people in this except for that Watcher first page was just an add-on to the
Yeah.
original story because the original story didn't have the Watcher in it.
It's
So
it's funny because you think I was a bit harsh last time we did No Prize, and I was saying how I don't understand why the What If show went and gave us a new character that had no impact on the Marvel universe. That's not what If was about. It should be about, you know.
yeah,
But then this Tales of Suspense were exactly that. They were like, this is another corner of a universe,
yeah,
you know, and you know, I thought,
they're kind of fun.
yeah, again, tonally, I think the tone of these type of books, these kind of one-shotty things, they
Yeah,
could be even more serious than the Star Lord bush, which is more serious than the Star Wars. So you got to think when you're a kid buying a Star Wars book, no wonder what's his name from Stockport thought the backup strips were terrible because they weren't aimed at him. They're not aimed at some 8-year-old kid who likes watching Star Wars.
I think a lot of these backup features, like and especially this Tales of the Watcher, works way better in black and white than it ever did in color.
It does.
So,
Yeah.
you see some of these inks and pencils, they kind of jump off the page when
Mm,
there's no color on them. So
mm.
I I like the shading in this book too. So
It's great, isn't it?
it's
It
good.
is great.
Yeah.
So it's funny how you can go have so many. You've got three different strips, three different tones, all banded together as Star Wars, and the idea that we're going to make some money off it.
It's one of those reasons that you see. Okay, I can see why people want these anthologies to work, right?
Mhm,
That because you're getting exposure to different characters, different artists, different writers,
mhm.
different ideas. So it is what it is.
It is what it is. I like them. I think they're great. If I get a chance, I've got a couple of the Star Wars weekly books kicking around. Someone bought me for Christmas a couple of years back. So if I
Uh,
see any more, I'm going to get them because I think they're class. I love them. All right. So our last book. This show's flown over.
I know.
How's how's this happen? All right. When we talk about British creators, there was, and you talk about the British invasion.
Yeah.
It is safe to say the invasion happened circa 79 through 89, potentially. That decade saw the influx of British writers and creators and
Yeah.
artists. You know, and no, I'm not counting you, John Byrne, just because you were born in England.
We've appropriated John Byrne. He's
Yeah,
one of us now.
yeah. Chris Claremont. Chris Claremont writes Captain Britain because he was born in Britain to American parents and holidays in Cornwall.
Ah,
But
yes.
by that method, my name should be Juan La Machina Hughes because I go to Mexico.
La Machina.
Anyway, two creators. We've spoke about one already a little bit. At the forefront of the British implosion, invasion into comic books is the great Alan Moore, and along with his artist buddy Brian Bolland. Now, when you say those two names together, you know what we're going to be talking about. So this is a difficult book for some people to look at. It can be triggering. So if you are not a fan of The Killing Joke, we'll see you next week. If, however, you want to hear us talk about the book, hang around, because that's where we're at now. There we go. All right, so this is a Killing Joke. Batman the Killing Joke from January 88. The original version, this isn't that, is on Go Collect for, if you get 9.6, $110.
Really?
Yeah, straight up.
I kind of feel like that's not enough for first printing.
Yeah, well, it gets
this
better.
book got this. Yeah, I know. Well, that book got printed, got reprinted and reprinted too.
Yeah, I think I've got a deluxe version, but not the original. eBay, you can buy it at various stages between £25 to £50. If you're buying it off eBay, bear in mind, Professor's just mentioned it, there are a number of different print runs on this. So make sure you're checking the dates to make sure you're getting a first print or wherever you are. However, there is a CGC graded 9.8 on there, first print at £279.
Not bad.
So there you go. We've mentioned it's written by Alan Moore. We're looking at the deluxe edition. So this is art by Brian Bolland, colors by Brian Bolland. Shout out to John Higgins, who was the original colorist the first time around. Okay, and Richard Starkins is on letters. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what this book is, this is the idea that it's one possible origin for the Joker.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the removal of Barbara Gordon from the DC universe.
Yep.
And it's the idea that all it takes is one bad day to send somebody to Larry Tap. Apart from Commissioner Gordon, because he hangs into his sanity like a bad guy. He's a good guy. Where are we up? 9 panels, which was all the form. Alan Moore, Watchmen, 9 panels, 9 panels. This is back when it was okay to do 9 panels as opposed to like every other book.
Well, I mean, they get away from it pretty quickly. I mean, this is like the first several pages where it's just you're just looking at the beautiful artwork as opposed to trying to read his story. But right when they start talking, they get away from the 9 panels.
Great. The art is just gorgeous. So the premise here is that the Batman has come up with the idea that somewhere along the line these two are going to kill each other, and he goes to make amends, to have a conversation with them, to try and solve one last time to get through to him, and then realizes that he's not there. And that panel there is just, there's so many iconic panels in this book. It's
Yep. There's a couple of panels in this book that I was like, I'm pretty sure I had a T-shirt like that.
Yeah. So there we are. There's the Joker being all Joker but this is the thing. He was a lot more menacing back in the 80s, I think. Now he's like a caricature of himself. They need to park his ass somewhere and not touch him for a good 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen. Change the black and white for the backstory on this one. And we get to see the failed comedian. What did you think when you first read this book the first time around?
So there are very few comics that I've ever read that when I was finished with it, first of all, went back to the beginning and read it again. Second of all, thought that I just experienced something that was like outside of comics.
Yeah.
That it was not just, this was not just a comic that I'm reading. This was something that was special and something that I thought was like, I mean, it was an instant classic when you read it, but this was something that I think that like it almost like it's like this has never been done in comics before. Was just like a retelling of a story that was aimed at kids initially, but redone for the adults, or those kids that were adults
Mm,
now, and
definitely.
and just to you have like a perfect marriage of a writer, Alan Moore, and an artist, Brian Boland, who like they had a similar vision, or they had the same
Mm,
ideas going forward, and like Boland knew exactly what Moore wanted out of the page and the colors,
mhm.
and this is why Boland recolored it, was he wasn't happy with the colors initially. So when you go back and those flashback scenes where they wash them out to black and white with the, I guess like it's like one color in each panel
Yeah,
that stands
yeah,
out. That was and initially, if you read the first printing, that was all in color.
yeah,
So it was interesting, shocking when you're like, okay, well, everybody knows Barbara Gordon from the Batman TV show from the '60s, and
yeah.
all of a sudden this happens, and that's the first time I actually saw the Joker being menacing,
Right.
like a true on bad guy psychopath.
Mm.
Um, this was the Joker that you see in the movies, right? In played by whatever his name was, I can't remember, but
Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger. Yeah, the Heath Ledger Joker was kind of like this.
Yeah,
Jack
Jack
Nicholson
Nicholson.
Joker. Yeah. So
I think all the Jokers have had that element of twisted maniacal elements on it. I
it,
think the Joker,
well,
very much like Batman, is a creature. We say this all the time. Is of its time. So if you want gangster Joker, Jared Leto. If you want crazy but clever Joker, it's Heath Ledger. If you just want that like over the top Joker, it's Jack Nicholson. And let's not forget Cesar Romero, of course, the
well,
best Joker
it's
of all.
Caesar Romero is the one that I usually think of. This is definitely not him.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
but
So yeah, uh,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
so the Joker shoots Barbara, takes photos as a means to try and break the commissioner.
That's the bad part of this book, by the way.
It is, it is, it is. But from that bad acorn,
Yeah.
Oracle comes along.
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't mean the bad part of the book was him shooting Barbara. It was the undressing her and taking pictures afterwards,
Yeah,
and then showing those pictures to Commissioner Gordon while he was terrorizing him. That
yeah,
was where I was like, "Oh, this is
yeah,
kind of a bit over the top,"
yeah,
but so essential to the story, and
definitely.
and it really kind of gives you that different view of the Joker that you hadn't seen before, right?
Mm,
Like, man, I knew the Joker was crazy, but come on,
mm.
you know?
And they don't shy away from the graphicness of it either. We are
Yeah.
going to shy away because we don't want people to complain about us. But there's nakedness, there's collars and all sorts of paraphernalia.
Yeah.
Um,
Language. There's language in this.
yeah, the one bad day, the Joker's missus dies, and
Yeah.
his that sends him down a dark path. Um, the photos. I'm going to focus on this for 2 seconds. There is a theory that the Joker actually did more than just take photos. I'm not sure how valid that is as a theory. I think you don't need to have that conversation. I think you just take it that the photos were taken.
I always looked at Joker as being an androgynous type character anyway.
That's a good
So
call. That is
yeah.
an absolute good call. Batman on the Warpath. Love that.
Yep.
I remember the first time I looked at this, I didn't like his ears. I didn't, but
You know,
I love
there's so many books that do the few pages of silence where you're looking at what at the action as it goes, and so many of those books, like, you just kind of okay. This is one of those first books that I actually had to stop, and I need to
Yeah,
look at each individual panel and the story that it's telling.
yeah.
And it's one of those things where silence is sometimes the most effective way to get the point across in the story.
Mm,
And I mean, just like, look at those two panels of silence right there.
yeah.
That's this did more, you know. You never looked at the Joker as like a character before, or like a human being, like
Mhm.
just a really disturbed human being. until you read this book and you're just
Mm,
like, wow, there's reasons that he's as crazy as he is, and
yeah.
he just separated himself from reality, and it's not because he plunged into a vat of toxic chemicals.
No, exactly. He was already broken before he took that dive.
Yep.
The outside just matches the inside now.
Yep.
Um, so gorgeous Batmobile.
Mm-hmm.
Very Dick Sprang for everyone who likes that over the top kind of thing.
Yep.
Um, Shenanigans in the fun house. The commissioner pleads with Bats by the book. We've got to show him
Yep.
how it works.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. I love that part because
mm,
that's the part where the Joker lost, right?
yeah, exactly. Whatever happens
So
on yeah, he's lost now. The monologue, which is infamous.
yeah,
I love getting the punch through the window is brilliant. I love that.
yeah.
Um, and this came out around about time or led to like the Legends of the Dark Knight, which we've talked about before, the early adventures of Batman, a kind
Yeah.
of Batman that's not as, although this is, you could argue, is late in his career, the
Did,
style of it all.
have you ever seen anybody fight Batman and actually just move his cowl like that? I thought that was
It's
I
brilliant.
thought
Yeah,
that was
but,
fantastic. And
yeah,
then hit him over the head with the 2x4, and you just like while he was still,
yeah,
his mask was still messed up. I thought
yeah.
that was great. I was like, wow, this is you're seeing a side of the Joker you don't normally see. So
Interesting. If you read if you have the deluxe edition, you can read the bit by Brian Bolland, the epilogue that he writes in this. This is the same gun that he was used to to shoot Barbara with, and now it's on its click click, not bang bang. Um, so, and then of course we get the joke, um, and then the final page is deliberately ambiguous.
yep.
Did he or did he not?
Well, this, when this book came out, it wasn't in continuity, right? So it
Right.
was when Moore Boland published when this was published, this was a outside the panels, outside the continuity Batman story, and
Mm-hmm.
it was so loved and so talked about, they had to incorporate it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so that's what made this last page so ambiguous, right?
Yeah.
Right? It
Did he kill?
left open to interpretation. I think at the end of this book, everybody thought, "Oh, he kills him at the end," you
I
know.
don't. I don't. I think I think he listens to Gordon, and I think he listens to Gordon. I mean, the whole book is about Batman saying, "Look, we need to do something because either you'll kill me or I'll kill you. That's the way it's going to end." Even the page before this is him saying, "Look, let me rehabilitate you. Let me help you." You know. So I don't know. I'm on the he doesn't kill him.
Has Alan Moore ever come out and said whether or
No,
not?
no, I don't think Alan Moore
Uh,
talks about DC Comics anymore.
yeah, I don't think so
Uh,
either. But I think in my interpretation, they said it. They said it two different times in the book. Either I'm going to kill you, or you're going
oh,
to
you're
kill
gonna kill
me.
me.
And then now
Yeah,
you're on the last page, and that's what makes you think,
yeah.
did he kill him?
Did he not? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an absolute gorgeous book. It is not for the faint of heart.
Oh no.
But by the same token, you can say that about Arkham, a Serious House, by Morrison and McKean, Dave McKean, which is even spookier than that one. But
Well,
what
Batman lends himself to being able to tell more adult stories.
definitely. What is it about then, do you think, British creators kind of doing well with Batman in different ways? You know what I'm saying? Because
I
you've got Grant Morrison, you've Alan Grant, you've had Moore, you've had Boland. You know, what is it that makes the British creator work well with bats?
they think outside the box. I think I just think that the stories that they tell that ushered in the 80s
Mm-hmm.
was just a total, and maybe it was Frank Miller that started it, but
Yeah.
maybe if you read Frank Miller and then you're like, oh wow, I can tell some of these stories that maybe never even thought to tell before.
Yeah.
And then there's so many different angles you can come at Batman from, from the villain's point of view, from the hero's point of view,
Mm-hmm.
from
Bruce's
so
point of
many,
view.
from all the different perspectives.
Yeah.
And it's it's, I guess, infinite the amount of interpretation you could do. But I think that the British interpretations, in we've talked a few times before about I had a beer with Garth Ennis a couple of years ago. Running into him, I ran into him at a bar and get to talk to him about his interpretation really of superheroes. And I kind of think that his interpretation was maybe kind of universal for the way Alan Moore thought, or the way, like, man, the way that I guess we in America translate superheroes into always like being infallible and
Right.
always being right and morally superior. And Garth Ennis literally said to me, "Well, if I had superpowers, I would be a right bastard." And I'm like, so that's that was his whole interpretation of The Boys. And
it was.
and so I was like, wow. And to be able to see it, we know like Alan Moore is well known for hating superheroes, but writing them, right? So
Swamp Thing, Batman.
Yeah. So the way that comes out, you write the characters that you just don't like them, and they come out as not being perfect people, right? So I really kind of think it's just an interesting angle. And Mark Millar told a bunch of different superhero stories in the Ultimates, where those characters over in Ultimates were just not great people either, right?
Kick-ass. Kick-ass. All right.
Yeah.
Kick-ass. All right. Excellent. So there you go. UK invasion of comic books. An interesting topic for sure. Professor, well done for thinking of that one.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Bang on that. I hope we've given you food for thought. We've looked at a few different books from the UK and from UK creators. So, you get to see that there are differences in there. It's an interesting topic, some fantastic books.
I feel like we could talk about it for another hour, but
if you want to find out more about British comics, by all means, just Google some names, man. Alan Moore, the ones we've mentioned: Alan Moore, Brian Bolland, Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison's worked both aisles. He's worked Marvel, he's worked DC, he's worked independent. So there's going to be something there that's going to tickle your funny bone somewhere along the line.
Brian Hitch. We mentioned a bunch of different creators.
So and they're still working now. So we mentioned Kieran Gillen, Abnett's on. He's just done Project Superpowers for Dynamite. So
Al Ewing, one of the hottest Marvel writers right now. He's English.
So there you go. So we're still making our mark in the Marvel universe and DC universe and comic books as a whole. So there you go. Professor, thank you so much for spending the time.
Oh, thank you, Johnny. It's always a pleasure.
Even though my heart is broken for my Dolphins. Don't forget to check out the UCPN for all your favorite shows, including Professor.
No Price Podcast, all about Disney Plus, the MCU, and we do manage to squeeze in some comics.
Don't forget to check out the Definitive Crusade back, talking about DC books. I talk about DC movies, but there are none, so that's easy enough to. And if you like talking about the creators, don't forget to check out Outside the Panels for everything that is creator-led. There you go. What more could you want? Hey, Professor, thanks again. Really appreciate your time, as always, sir. I have been your host, Johnny Machine Hughes. It's that time. Adios. Okay.